Open Education Week. My name is Spencer and I'm from the Colorado Department of Higher Education. So delighted to have you here. This again is one in a series of presentations from our fantastic colleagues and collaborators and OER grantees throughout the state of Colorado. So thank you for joining us, and hopefully you can join us for some of the other sessions throughout the week. As you can see, I have the page pulled up here for the Open Education Week celebration through the Department of Higher Education. Governor Polis has officially proclaimed the first week of March Open Education Week. This is so exciting for us. So if you all feel you would like a copy of the proclamation because you want to print it out, I made this joke yesterday, if you can print it out and put it on your refrigerator next to your kids' straight A papers, it's very exciting and very encouraging for us who are doing this work throughout the state of Colorado. So thank you so much for joining us today. And hopefully you can join us for some of the sessions throughout the week. We are delighted today to have our colleagues from Red Rocks Community College, specifically Karen Neville, Director of Libraries at Red Rocks Community College, who's been working on this grant program for the past 2.5 years, but doing this work obviously much longer than that. And Karen, I will let you kind of take it from here and introduce yourself from there. So thank you all and enjoy the presentation.
Right, I'm going to share my screen and oops. Okay, so I am Karen Neville. I'm the library director at Red Rocks Community College. I'll tell you a little bit more about me as we go, but first, a little bit of information about Red Rocks Community College. We have an FTE of just under 5,000 right now. But with that, we actually have a head count of 12,000 students. So most of our students are part-time. It's pretty common at community colleges. We've got about 100 faculty and over 400 adjunct instructors. Like all of the community colleges in the area, we've got a huge breadth of programs that we offer, 60 plus areas of study. These range from HVAC and electrical to fine woodworking to philosophy to water quality management, history, literature, and we are the only community college in the country that offers a master's degree, and that's the Master's of Physician's Assistant. It's an MPAS, and I can't remember what the S stands for, I apologize. So we offer 1- and 2-year certificates, AAAS, AGS, and AAS, as well as a bachelor's in water quality management and the master's in the PA program. We've got 2 campuses, one in Lakewood, one in Arvada. Arvada is where the majority of our health sciences and allied health programs are, but we offer a full range of general education requirements up at Arvada as well. As I said, I'm the library director, and OER sort of became one of my other duties as assigned. I am also our campus copyright officer, so I think there was some thought that fit in sort of organically. Also, you know, as a librarian, that whole information wants to be free thing is real important to us. So open access is something I've been working in for years, long before I came to Red Rocks, but it sort of became part of my job duties more formally in the last 1.5 years. And it's very interesting because I am sort of the point person on campus for OER. But one of the things that I like to talk about is the story of OER at Red Rocks really is all about our faculty. You know, we have faculty who have totally embraced this movement sort of across the board. This is not a complete list of all the courses which are using OER in at least some of the classes and sections. But again, we see everything from, you know, math and the sciences to poli-sci and philosophy, theater, early childhood education. So we really have a wide variety of faculty who have been working on OER, and they've been working on it for a very long time. I think one of our first OER experiments was over 7 years ago in one of our algebra classes. One of the faculty members just decided, hey, this is a thing I want to try doing. Let's see how it goes. We are getting very close to having some AA and AS pathways that will be completely zero textbook costs. We've got a couple holes we're planning to fill in this year with the final year of the grant. And while not all students would be able to necessarily go all the way through, there would be a set of courses that you could take all the way through for an AA or an AS that would be zero textbook cost. So we're continuing to sort of fill in some of those gaps, but it really has always been a story of this was a thing the faculty wanted to do. So in preparing for this presentation, what I did was I actually reached out to all of our faculty that have been involved and said, tell me about how you got here. Tell me about why this is important to you. Tell me about where, what things you would have to say to your peers, what things have worked for you, what things have been frustrating, and got to have a series of fantastic conversations with some of our really amazing faculty. And so I'll be sharing with you a lot of the things that they shared with me, because again, I really feel like I'm just at a dead run to keep up with the faculty. They're the ones really driving this, and I think that's the way it should be. But it's my job to, do some of the grant administration and some of the back end stuff, but they're really the ones who are our OER heroes. So one of the things that we asked was, why OER? And of course, one of the things we always talk about with is the cost savings for our students. And this was one of our faculty shared this anecdote from the semester. She said, one of the students stayed on Zoom after our class ended. He said, now I know I'm going to have to buy a textbook for this class, right? And when I told him there was no textbook and all the material was ready and available to him on D2L, I thought he was going to cry. He said, oh, thank God. Do you know how expensive textbooks are? It's killing me, man. We had another one of my faculty related to me. I can tell you that seeing my students' faces via the little squares on Zoom, the first day when I reassured them of the fact that they do not need to purchase a textbook and that it was available to them for free was great. I could almost feel the sense of relief through the computer. That alone made me feel better about this process and the work that we have done and continue to do. Now, one of the things that we have found is that for the cost savings for students is obviously primarily important to the students. It's a huge thing for them. And there are faculty who very much respond to that relief from their students about the textbook costs. But we also have some faculty for whom this is not the most convincing argument. And it's not that they're callous, it's that, they look at higher education and they look at that there are a ton of costs and, we as a society don't necessarily fund higher education in the way that we could. And they say, why are we putting all the pressure on the faculty to save the students money? Like we're talking nickels and dimes here, where it's like, really, we need to make some systemic change in how our area is done. And I appreciate that. I get that. And I also, whenever I talk with my faculty, talk about OER is not always the right answer for every class. And so we look at a lot of the other reasons why faculty really want to use OER. But the cost savings aren't insignificant. This was just a smattering of things I pulled together, and we look at our college algebra class, and obviously we have more students in that class, I think, than any other class that we offer. $97,000 a semester in savings to students is not insignificant. But even some of our smaller classes, Spanish, curriculum methods, these are classes that'll have 20 students in them. It's not a whole lot of money overall for the semester, but for each of those students, that still represents a pretty significant savings. So, I talked about how not all the faculty are necessarily sold on the, okay, saving costs. Talked to one of our other early adopter faculty, and said, how did you guys were way at the forefront. How did you guys get here? And she had said, we started to see the true possibilities of OER. And that's, we have control of the content. Materials available on day one. There's no more frustration with online homework systems. We don't have students saying to us, the bookstore says the code's on my receipt. I lost my receipt. What do I do? All of those sorts of problems that used to be very common. But the big thing that for this faculty member was that they could make constant improvements based on student feedback. They're not locked into the order in which the publisher thinks that they should teach things, or this content isn't explained very well for my students. They're not grasping it. So I can make those changes to the content and really make it speak to my students. Another one of my faculty said, we can build exactly what we want and need. I walk into a class with the exact materials I think is best for the students. If the student population in front of me changes or they need extra help on a certain topic, I have the flexibility to adjust on the fly. And this is something that I hear over and over again from our faculty, is they really are starting from what are the student learning outcomes and how can we best meet those? And if we can do that with low cost or zero cost materials, all the better. But the primary focus really always is on how are we best meeting those student objectives. One of our math faculty had said, we have become so successful with OER and Webwork, which is the online homework system that Red Rocks, CCD, and a number of other community colleges are using, as well as, I guess, CUNY in New York is starting to use, and there's some other colleges across the country are starting to use Webwork with the homework sets we put together, and other community colleges have put together. We have become so successful with OER and Webwork and math that the students have forgotten or never known how frustrating publisher online homework platforms can be. I never have frustrated students in my office anymore complaining about a platform that they put in the correct answer, but it told them it was wrong. Now we don't have that issue. Now I just have students complaining that the platform is awful because it's hard, the content, not the platform. And that the platform expects perfection, which computers do, and so do professors for giving full credit. It's been fun to watch the content of the students' complaints shift. And this is again from one of our math faculty, and she keeps talking about how what she's hearing now is the content's hard, but it's not that they're not understanding it based on the materials they're given. And because they have put together the problem sets in Webwork to go with the OpenStax text that they're using, there's a match between the language and the way it's being taught, and it's really, really working well for our students. One of the other things that our faculty have found is fantastic is we can really customize, again, what we need. We have a Semcore model of math class. It combines our 055, which is quantitative literacy, and 121, which is algebraic literacy, into a single semester. It's a pretty intensive math course because it's really, 2 math classes in a semester. But the Semcore model was only possible due to OER, as it was built pulling and using a variety of resources mixed together in unique ways. It was thinking outside of the box that is hard to do with publishers. And the data shows that it is far more successful for the students. And my next slide talks a little bit about with our Semcore classes, which is, again, that combination of the 055 and 121 in a single semester. When we are doing them in Semcore, we are seeing an 85% pass rate for the 055 portion and an 83% pass rate for the 121 portion, compared to only 56% of the students were passing 055 when it was when it's offered as a standalone course. So we're seeing a huge increase in success, and it's not entirely due to OER. As any of you have worked in trying to assess how OER is working, there's always a host of confounding things that you can't necessarily figure out. where OER is working and where it isn't. But what we have seen time and time again is that our students perform equally well, if not better, with the open educational resources than they were with the standard publisher resources. And the really exciting thing for us, as we are all so focused on equity gap issues, is we are seeing even bigger increases for students who identify as minorities. So we're really seeing that OER is helpful in closing that equity gap. This, I think, though, was the really, like, of all the conversations I had with my faculty, this was the one that was sort of the most amazing. It changed the paradigm of how I teach. It gives students agency. We come together and learn as a team. We collaborate and learn together and build the course together. When this professor started using OER, this was our math professor who started using it back in 7 years ago. They came to it, and they very much came to it as a collaborative sort of thing. This is the this is the goals we have to hit. These are the things we're going to learn together. Let's get the information. And the students really embraced the challenge of being involved in that process and providing the feedback for, this is working for me, this isn't working for me. And one of the stories that Adam likes to relate about this was back in the very early days of OpenStax. And one of the things that was really kind of difficult for some of the students was not having a physical textbook. And this was just as OpenStax was apparently starting to print them, because at the beginning of the semester, Adam could not find a printed version of the text, and about halfway through the semester, one of his students walked in holding the textbook over her head in a printed version, and she was so excited because she had been able to find it. And they immediately, half the class went out and bought them. They were really excited. But the student took it upon herself to go, this is what I need, let me keep looking for how I can get it in a format I want. And they took that through every aspect of how they laid out that class, how they developed the things that were working for them and not. We hear that time and time again. The students are taking a lot greater agency in their education because they are able to provide feedback that actually does something useful. I remember the days of hating my textbook in whatever class when I was in school, and there wasn't a lot you could do about it. The textbook was the textbook. There wasn't a whole lot of room to do anything constructive with that feedback. Whereas in an open educational environment, the feedback that the students give directly impacts not only their learning for that semester, but then the students who come after them. So some of the little tidbits of wisdom we got from our faculty to share were 3 pieces of advice for anyone thinking of developing new OER. Test, test, test. Send it to your colleagues at other schools. Bribe your students. One of our chemistry professors, who is actually writing his own organic chemistry text, would actually hand out candy bars to anyone who found a typo or any other error. And he's now gotten to the point where he is leaving intentional Easter eggs in his text as they're going through the testing process to see who's paying attention. Again, there is very little a student enjoys more than being able to say to the professor, hey, this book you wrote is wrong. Because it really shows that they have a mastery and an investment in what they're doing, and they really do enjoy doing that. Brandon had said, candy bars were a great incentive, but really the ability to go, hey, you messed this up, was almost a bigger incentive for his students. Other things that the faculty said, you don't have to recreate the wheel. Part of OER is about beg, borrow, and steal. It's all about repurposing. It's all about finding what's out there and making it work for you. We also have faculty who are very strong about, try pilot projects, do it in one section, and then share that data out with your faculty, particularly the faculty in your department and your adjuncts. Show them how it worked for your class. My computer is okay. And then the other thing that the one of my other faculty said was, I'm learning that it's not exactly all or nothing like I'd hoped, but we've drastically reduced the cost for all our students. There are certain texts in certain fields that are seminal texts, and they're going to use them as a professional resource if they go forward and that as a career. Those are things they're still going to probably have to buy. The other thing we run into is in English classes or in theater classes, if we're using current works, you can't get open source versions of them. We need to pay the authors and the playwrights and the creators of that content for their work. And we certainly want to teach students that that's a thing that we should do as well. So again, it's not always the answer in all cases, but if we can reduce those costs where we can, it makes the handful of things that they do have to buy a little bit more accessible. I also had faculty who've told me, I thought it would be so easy, but there are not a lot of existing OER resources out there in my subject area. I have a faculty who is a political science professor. They are looking, along with the other community college poli-sci professors, they're looking to do an OER version of the Intro to Poli-Sci class. The problem with the Intro to Poli-Sci class is it's only required in like 3 states, Colorado, Wyoming, and New Mexico. So there aren't a lot of textbooks out there in any realm. There aren't a lot of publisher textbooks, so they're expensive and they're not particularly great. But there's also not a lot of open resources either. So they're finding that this is one of those cases where they can't just go find all of the great material that's out there. They're going to have to, in this case, probably do a lot of the creation on their own. One of my other professors that said, there are 2 approaches. You can find existing materials or you can create your own. And sometimes it can be just as time consuming to find the existing materials as it is to create your own. So sometimes, instead of spending the time trying to find all the things that are out there, professors are finding, I have the expertise, I can build these things for my classes. A big thing also that they stressed was collaborate. Having a partner for brainstorming, editing, developing lesson plans was key. And that the community can exist outside of the institution. Obviously, if you have a colleague in your institution that's working with you, that's fantastic. But there are lots of opportunities across the across the state, across the country, people who are out there doing these things, and finding them and making those connections is really helpful in developing the OER content. So what are our next challenges? Faculty can implement OER, but leadership is really needed to elevate OER. We have absolutely had a grassroots effort, and we have had phenomenal faculty participation in a huge variety of places. One of the things, though, that this has meant is we have clumps of OER here, and we have clumps of OER here, and we have clumps of OER here, and it's not necessarily a door-to-door pathway view. And so we are now really at the point where we are the faculty and myself and some others are really looking to leadership to say, look, this is a thing we need to make a pillar of what we're doing. We want to make sure that students do have a door-to-degree pathway where they can have 0 cost. That may not be 100% OER. That may be things we finance in other ways. But these are things we can do. But now we've got to have somebody looking at what are the classes we need to fill in the gaps. The other piece that we've needed leadership in is technical support. We have a phenomenal IT department who has stood up some incredible virtual machines that have allowed us to do a lot of amazing things, particularly in the sciences and in the math department. But having an IT department that says, yeah, let's figure out how to make this work. Our IT department set up a DSpace server for us. We haven't had a chance to do much with it, but we're gonna start being able to put our own place for things to reside at Red Rocks and not having to be able to not necessarily having to find homes for it elsewhere. And then the big thing that we're really now working on is we just got approval to have a standing committee, a standing OER committee. We have had several ad hoc work groups for OER, but we have put together a formal charge of the OER committee, a formal description and what the membership and all of those things are going to be. And literally yesterday, I got approval from our collaboration council that we will be going forward with the standing OER committee. Our OER committee is going to focus on recommending and building the necessary structure to support open educational resources, supporting the growth of the culture, including mentoring and advising faculty, considering all of the college financial impacts. And this was an important thing for us because 2 years ago, we were not being opposed by administration, but really facing a lot of questions. If we move things to OER, what are the knock-on effects? If the bookstore revenue goes down, what are all of these effects? And so we really want to make sure that part of what we're doing as the committee is really considering all of those. And then really focusing on collecting evidence to support continuous quality improvement as it relates to OER. This is one of those things where I know that we all really want to be good about assessment, but we're not all really good about assessment. And so we have a brand new executive director starting in April for, used to be institutional effectiveness, now it's something planning and analytics. But we are really looking forward to working with him about, how do we really sort of look at the impact that OER has at our college. And related to that, it's data, data, and data, more data. What do we collect? Where do we store it? How do we evaluate and use it for decision making? One of the things that we sort of anecdotally know is that OER helps with retention, but how do you track that? How do you prove it? How do you demonstrate? Well, and to some extent, proving it's going to be a little iffy, but how do you demonstrate it? How can we demonstrate that OER has an impact on enrollment and other things like that? So we're really sort of looking at, how are we going to use, what data do we have and how are we going to be able to use it? And then, of course, the final thing is sustainability. We have been absolutely fortunate at Red Rocks to have been grant funded through the state grant program for OER. We also are very realistic that we don't think that it's probably going to come up for yet another year. We'd love to see that happen, but knowing what the economy is doing, we're not holding our breath that there will continue to be grant funding for that. So we want to make sure that we are finding places for there to be continued funding. Making sure that OER adaptation creation is considered service for faculty. And then one of the things that our faculty have really asked for time and time again is funding is great, and getting, grant money to be able to develop these resources is great, but sometimes what we really need is more time. And can we work out ways to negotiate release time instead of additional funding? And, again, it's from a certain standpoint, it's all money one way or the other to the college, because if you give release time, you're paying an adjunct. But what the faculty are really saying is, look, I am happy to do this. I'm excited to do this. I cannot add it on top of my day. Give me some space to do this. So that's another thing we're working on with this. So as I'm coming to the end here, I want to save, definitely some time for questions. I was trying to figure out sort of how to wrap this up. And what I have come up with is this is the pick your Pebble parable. I've had a whole number of thoughts that kind of came together, and they were all sort of centered around pebbles. And one of them is the pebble in your shoe. And the things that are not the biggest annoyance, but sometimes are the straw. And I have seen, especially working in the library, time and time and time again, where the cost of the textbook is the pebble in the shoe for the student that makes them say, I cannot do this. I have had students in my office in tears saying, I'm going to have to drop this class because I can't afford the textbook. And the library can't buy a copy of it because it's an electronic only publisher resource and they won't sell it to us. You know, and nothing breaks my librarian's heart more than having to say, I can't get information for you, but sometimes that's the position that the publishers put us in. So I have seen those students where even the $30 textbook is going to be the thing that puts them over the edge and makes them drop a course or withdraw from a course. I have also seen the ripples that pebble can cause in the surface of the water in terms of all of the knock-on effects from OER. I see it when my faculty talk about how invested their students are in improving the textbook. I see how it changes their pedagogy. I see how they're able to adapt and do some really exciting things. One of my business professors is developing OER content and came to me and said, I need to find open access images that are more diverse. All of the business images I'm finding are white guys shaking hands around a table. Help me find images that look like my students. And so those small changes that we make in some of those things really do have big impacts for our students. Our students really do value seeing themselves in their textbooks. And that's something that OER really does for us. And the last sort of Pebble story that I have is, you know, there's the saying about you can move a mountain one pebble at a time. And one of the things I heard from a lot of my faculty is, you know, we just have to keep moving the ball forward. There are a lot of things that the pandemic sidelined for us, but that doesn't mean we can't come back to them. And so we're going to make those incremental steps. We're going to continue to move forward with OER. We're going to continue to make this resources more accessible to our students. We're going to continue to make them cheaper. We're going to continue to do what's best for our students. And so it's really about just keeping moving. And sometimes that may just be one pebble, but we got to keep the momentum going, and eventually we'll get the mountain removed. So I have now talked for a very long time. And I see there are some things in the chat, so let me pull it up. We've got Jonathan was commenting about the reduction in complaints was not about the access codes or the cost. It was really about the quality of the questions that were in Webwork. And students were finding, and actually I see this with my own kids in their math classes when they're doing the online homework, where sometimes you will put in the right answer and it's like, nope, that's not what the answer is. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I can do 4th grade math. And I'm pretty sure that is in fact what the answer is. Could be wrong, but so they really were seeing a lot of comments about the quality and those sorts of things. So that was interesting. And again, yeah, it's that input of thousands, and it's input by faculty who are teaching the subject. And I think that's what's really exciting about all those questions that are getting built in the Webworks database, is they're all being built by teaching faculty. And so it really is people who are in the classroom trying to convey this information to students who are really getting, who are really putting that together. Campus Print Shop will print OER books. We're trying to figure out how we're going to make that work. Anything obviously that comes from OpenStax we can do, and we've got some other options for it as well. But yeah, we're definitely trying to figure out how we're going to make that, because students sometimes for some things really do need the paper copy, and I absolutely respect that. Can I share the charge of the OER committee? I might be able to. I'm going to stop my share for a second. That was sort of the short version there. I am absolutely happy to share with you the document. I can send it out, but let me see if I can pull it up really quickly.
Karen, while you're doing that too.
No, because I can't. Yep.
First of all, thank you. Fantastic. Love to hear what's going on at Red Rocks. And and opportunities for collaboration with those on the call and across the state. I see Doug asked about the faculty who are using the Webwork. Could you talk a little bit more just about the Webwork in general at Red Rocks, and then maybe we could connect, you and Doug could connect on particular faculty or connections.
Yeah, absolutely. Our math faculty are using Webwork. Our biology faculty are using Webwork. Our physics faculty are using it. I think our chem faculty are using it as well. And so it's a platform where it really just is that sort of the generic platform for being able to build the test bank of questions in. And Brenda Forland, who is the chair of our math department and an absolutely phenomenal professor and huge OER advocate, would be thrilled to talk to anyone about Webwork and how we can make it work for you. And there's a lot of people in the community college system who are using it, but like I said, I know that it's getting a lot of traction sort of outside of the system as well.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I know, as a matter of fact, that Brenda and then the other lead on the, at least I know this from the grant side of things, the other lead is at CCD,
Yep.
James Morski. And so Doug, what I could do, yeah, I can connect you with Brenda. It's Forland, Forland. I can connect you with Brenda and James. If you just remind me, Doug, I'd be happy to do that, or anybody else interested in learning more about the CCCS Webwork project.
Yeah, and that's Brenda's email. And I've now lost my Zoom window. Let me. You know, you would think with as much as we all do Zoom these days that I would be significantly more competent at using it, but that has not been the case. The background information was some stuff that my VPA put in just to kind of give the committee some context. But this is, you know, we put together a mission, and then the description. One of the things we did was we set out that we wanted to have, we really want it to be a faculty heavy committee. So we're looking for faculty from each of our pathway communities. We also want to make sure we have academic faculty and CTE faculty included. We want to make sure we've got a dean who's attending, as well as our instructional technology and e-learning folks. And we will probably have sort of an ex officio member from business services somewhere who will occasionally come in and talk about some of the business things. But this specifically are what our goals are. So it's the mentoring and advising faculty, establishing standards and best practices, establishing benchmarks and procedures for evaluating the success of OER projects, assess progress on ZTC degrees and pathways, and making recommendations where necessary. Also working with marketing. This is becoming a huge thing for us, is how do we even tell students? We're all having a great flail right now in the requirements for the Colorado statute that requires us to make that information available, but sort of figuring out how we tell that to students and how we tell it to them in a way that makes sense is sort of a bigger challenge than just the marking things in banner, although that's its own set of challenges as well. And then obviously making recommendations to our president, VPA, and other folks in terms of where we need to be focusing priorities and resources. And I'm certainly happy to send this to anybody who would like it. It's not any great trade secrets, so I am happy to share that. Let's see. Any other questions? Did I miss anything in the chat?
Karen, this is Doug again. Can you share with us how Red Rocks has used your grant dollars?
We have primarily to this point funded faculty in OER development. So we have specifically done direct payments to faculty in terms of the time that they spent either investigating OER, creating OER, evaluating OER, all of those things. That has been the majority of our funding. We have also set aside money for professional development. We had hoped to be doing a lot more professional development and outreach activities to faculty, but COVID kind of sidelined a whole lot of that because we wanted to do a number of in-person workshops, do things at chair meetings, do those sorts of things. And at this point, what we're hearing from our faculty is, please do not make me do anything else. And dear God, let it not be sitting in another Zoom meeting. So we've kind of shifted some of that funding and are hoping that, maybe in the fall, we'll be able to resume some of those things, although we're not specifically going to be funding as much of that in the latest round of the grant. The thing we're actually really excited about in the third year of the grant was we asked for funding for a part-time, term limited, it's slightly less than a year, position to help do a lot of the infrastructure work. So setting up the DSpace server, setting up the documents for best practices, collecting the data, figuring out a way to store the data, working with the institutional research in terms of like what things can we analyze, and doing a lot of the stuff that I think theoretically was expected of me as the sort of OER ambassador. However, when I got voluntold that that was my new role, it didn't come with any release of duties. And as the pandemic has certainly only increased some of my other duties, there just literally are not enough hours in the day for me to get to some of these OER activities. So we're really excited about having someone to kind of get some of that groundwork started so that then it just becomes a matter of sustaining it as opposed to getting some of these things created from the ground up. And if nothing else, maybe some of these things will get done and I can quit feeling guilty about them.
Well, I know we're getting close on time. Karen, thank you so much. It's great to hear kind of the level of engagement that you've had with the faculty, I think is telling of the strength of your initiative at Red Rocks. And I'm excited that you all are moving from 2 years to 3 years of the grant, and just really excited for the work you're doing. And thank you again for sharing with us this week.
Yep. And I have put up, that's my contact information. Feel free to contact me with any questions. We do have a very in progress LibGuide we've started to put together with resources. Again, that's one of those things we want to have that part-time person work on improving. We've got this library assistant here, Jack. He's really been slacking during the pandemic. He hasn't been picking up his weight. So we are looking forward to using some of that grant money to do some of that work. So please feel free to reach out and contact me with any questions.
Thank you, Karen. And thanks everybody for attending. Hopefully we'll see you at some of the other sessions throughout the week. I dropped the link in there, and enjoy your nice warm weather. Hopefully you can get outside. Thanks, Karen. Thanks all.